The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Meet the Scholars with your host, Senior Student Fellow Grace Riley.
Hello and welcome to the third season of Meet the Scholars. My name is Grace Riley, and today the Institute for Faith and Freedom is happy to welcome Dr. Gary Welton. Dr. Gary Welton is a professor of psychology here at Grove City College. He is the Assistant Dean for Institutional Assessment at Grove City College, and he is also a contributor for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. Dr. Welton, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to begin, what started your interest in psychology and what led you to study it?
So when I was a college student, my church had a major split. Like half of the people ended up leaving. It had as far as I could tell, no doctrinal theological issues. It was a power play. It was a personality thing. Mm-hmm. I saw my Sunday school teachers, my Awana club leaders, bickering and fighting with each other. It's like, there's some lessons here that they haven't learned, that I haven't learned. I need to learn from this. And so I began what ended up as a major pursuit in conflict resolution. How do we go about resolving our conflicts?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously very relevant today in a lot of different areas, but just, from the perspective of the church, what does faith have to do with psychology? Obviously, faith is the root of everything, but what is faith's role in understanding people and psychology?
So psychology as a discipline has had contributions from many people on the left, and you have a whole lot of emphasis on humanistic approaches, that the problems we have as people is because our environment hasn't been rich enough, and if we just had a better environment, we would all develop a utopia. That's not our approach as Christians, that we believe that we are fallen, rebellious creatures. We need God's work in our lives. So clearly a different approach from where we start in our understanding of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And looking at, there is polarization in the church, unfortunately, and also in the political climate. So looking at the political climate today, I think that there's a lot that can be understood by the study of psychology. Just considering, you wrote a piece back in 2017 for the Institute for Faith and Freedom talking about political polarization and group polarization's role in that. And I would argue that in 2023 today, it's even more relevant. So with that considered, what do you think that, the role of group polarization is in our political climate today, and just in understanding how divided we are?
So we deal with this constantly. Social media, we tend to spend our time looking at posts of people who agree with us. We ignore the posts of people who have different views. Group polarization research shows that when we dialogue and interact with people who agree with us, we tend to become more extreme. So that the impact of social media, as much as anything else, we tend to become even more polarized. I would suggest that in my era, the administrations of Reagan, Bush, and Clinton showed the best bipartisan interaction, that Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill, Clinton worked with Newt Gingrich. Whereas now, we go through a few years where the Democrats control everything, and they go extreme in one direction. We go through a few years where the Republicans control everything, and we're at the point where the only people who can get through the primary process are those that take extreme views, that we no longer have moderates like John McCain running for office.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. It's been very interesting to watch over the past few years even how much has changed. And for me as a college student, especially looking at it, it's kind of all I can remember is all the divisions. So it is really interesting to look at that and see the role that social media has played, because I agree, social media has certainly played a really big role in making it easy to do that and easy to kind of just associate yourselves with people that are on your side. But considering that, what do you think is the danger in that where people kind of just stay in an echo chamber and only follow people that they agree with and, don't want to interact with people that they don't agree with, as far as relationally that goes?
So one of the psychologists I will mention is Jonathan Haidt, a book entitled The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And he's a social psychologist. Social psychology tends to be dominated by individuals on the left. And he came to the conclusion that social psychology as a discipline suffers because it's so dominated by one perspective. That certainly while I consider myself on the conservative side of things, I recognize that there are valid points made on the other side, and we do best as a society, we do best as a science when we interact, seek to understand the arguments of the other side. And with the group polarization, we just come to label the other side as we just have a bunch of wackos, they don't have anything to offer. But in fact, if we step back and look more honestly at the real debates that exist and the real challenges, strengths, and weaknesses, we will do much better as a discipline of social psychology, and we do much better in terms of our political atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really great points. And it just, brings me back to your first point about how conflict resolution is what kind of brought you into psychology through looking at the church. And I think that through a lot of these topics, what I think of is the family and how, young people today in the family, they're immersed in all of this social media. And there's a lot of worship of the self in our culture. And more hedonistic ideas. So with America turning more secular in that way, what do you think that means for the Christian family?
So I think this is a serious problem in the United States. So one of the courses I teach here at Grove City College is CrossCultural Psychology. And that discipline has suggested that the United States is the most extreme individualistic country in the world. That's not what we want in our churches. We want fellowship, we want communion of the saints, and that's really stands in opposition to what we see in our society as a whole. And we tend to take that extreme individualism, it becomes a part of our life. It makes it difficult for us to learn to interact, to share ourselves, to love our spouses, to love our neighbors. One of the lines of research that I was involved in, a research grant from the Templeton Foundation, was looking at the issue of forgiveness. And we chose for that study to work with couples whose relationship had fallen apart. Some of these were in the process of divorce, some of them had never been married, but they've got kids. They've got to figure out how to parent these kids. Even though we're not getting along, we still have to learn positive ways to interact with each other. And that's just a fallout of the radical individualism that we see, and that when all of us need to develop those skills of conflict resolution, of empathizing, understanding the cognitive perspective of others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way to end too, with kind of the root of a lot of problems. And I think recognizing that and the things that people are idolizing or prioritizing is a really interesting way to look at a lot of the problems that we're facing in America. But thank you so much for joining me.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Meet the Scholars. Please be on the lookout for the Institute for Faith and Freedom's other work that they're putting out. Be sure to check out Dr. Welton's work and tune in for the next episode coming soon. Thank you.